Well, thank you. Hovind, let me say, I'm from Texas. This is bloody cold right now. And it may be a sign that hell is frozen over. Because what we've seen in Washington is we've seen Republicans come together united. I'm here today to praise the Republican majority in the House of Representatives. They came together, they stood as one, and they passed a serious bill that avoids a default on our debt and that makes serious steps to reining in the out-of-control spending and the debt that is bankrupting our kids and grandkids. If you're at home and you're sick and tired of the inflation that is making life harder each and every day, you're tired of paying more at the grocery store, you're tired of paying more in rent, you're tired of paying more at the gas pump, it was caused by trillions of dollars of spending from out-of-control Democrats, and the House majority has stood up and led and said we've got to rein that back in for the working families who are hurting across this country. Senate Republicans are here today standing shoulder to shoulder, united with House Republicans. And I have to say the behavior of President Biden to date on this issue has been wildly reckless and irresponsible. Biden's position has been, up until 2 days ago, he would not negotiate, he would not compromise, he wouldn't even sit down and talk. That was obviously unreasonable. And Biden was doing more than that. He was threatening default of the debt. He was playing roulette with the American economy. Let me be clear. There is one man on planet Earth, and one man only, who can ensure we do not default on our debt. His name is Joseph Robinette Biden, Jr. And here's what a responsible president would say. He would stand up and say, America will never, ever, ever default on our debt. Every month, federal tax revenues exceed cost for the interest of the debt. If the president said we won't default on our debt, we wouldn't. But there's a reason Biden is not saying that. He wants to scaremonger. He wants to scare the stock market. He wants to scare the bond markets. He's counting on the corporate media to echo his scaremongering. But I've got very simple advice on who President Joe Biden should listen to. President Joe Biden should listen to Vice President Joe Biden. In 2011, when Republicans in the House stood strong on the debt ceiling, again because Democrats had had majority of the Congress for 2 years, had passed trillions in irresponsible spending, and Republicans stood strong and said we will not raise the debt ceiling without serious fiscal reform. What happened? Then Vice President Joe Biden came and negotiated a deal called the Budget Control Act that was designed to cut $2.3 trillion in spending. It was the most significant federal spending reform in modern times. That happened because Barack Obama blinked and Biden, Vice President Biden, sat down with House Republicans and reached a meaningful compromise. President Joe Biden needs to do the same thing, and I'll say, sadly, the reason he hasn't so far, I believe, is because his mental faculties are too diminished right now to do what he did in 2011, to sit down and actually work together on a solution to the problems. And what we're left with is a bunch of young staffers in the White House, radical children, who are perfectly willing to risk a default on the debt because they have no appreciation of the chaos and misery and damage a default would do. We should not default on our debt, but the present path we're on is unsustainable, and Joe Biden needs to come to the table. And I will say it is a major victory for America that the day before yesterday, Biden finally blinked and said, okay, I'll sit down and talk. That's the first step. Now, the second step is let's solve the problem. With that, let's open it up to questions.